thank you for, just accepting to do this. I'm always, I don't know much about cars, so I always have to speak to an expert, and I thought you'd be the right person to speak to. So there you are.
That's right. I don't know much about anything that's not cars, so between us, we've got everything covered.
Exactly. So, so obviously you are very much into your cars, but the classic plus the, and the day-to-day, the normal, what have you. But I'd like to find out how you got started, as in what was the, what got you into cars.
It's really funny because I have car friends, and you ask most of them how they got into cars. The answer is, oh, my dad was into cars.
Right.
And I shared that passion. But my dad, may he rest in peace, wouldn't have known a good car if it would have run him over. And I've got no idea where it came from. But even as a kid, I remember having these dinky little model cars. In fact,
right.
In fact, stuff like this. Well, actually, this is a model of an actual car I've got. So someone bought this as a birthday present. So, I still have them. I haven't grown up at all. But I used to line them up, and I always loved cars. And then when I got to working, or got to 17, got my license as soon as I could, and bought my first car as quick as I could. But when I got to working, it became pretty apparent that for me, a salary was a means of buying cars.
Right.
At one point early on in my old career, I lived in the West End. I worked in the city, and I owned 3 cars.
In the city?
Yeah. I used to take the bus to work, but I still owned 3 cars because I just have to. I don't know what it is. I have to have them. So I don't know. I have no idea where it comes from.
I need to ask, where did you park the cars in the city?
So I had one outside my girlfriend at the time, now my wife's place, and the resident parking permit in West Kensington. I had one outside where I lived on a resident parking permit in Paddington, and I had a third one down near the Finchley Road, because back then there was no parking restrictions on the Finchley Road area. Like when you walk down about 5 minutes, I used to just keep a car there. It's the closest place I could find to where I lived. That didn't have a parking permit requirement. So yeah,
it sounds like you had a plan just to make sure you had these 3 cars.
Do you know what plan? It does sound like I had a plan. No plan. Just going crazy and trying to fit in what I could. But I worked in marketing for quite a few years, and I worked mainly for banks in their marketing departments, and I loved it. I was a nightmare employee because I always wanted that next pay rise, not because I wanted the money. I just knew that if I got X amount more per year, I could then change that car for that car. So it's always about the cars for me. And then I quit the marketing industry. I quit corporate life and I started going on my own to my own marketing as a bit of a side thing. Because friends have always asked me when they're looking to buy a car, Ashley, can you do this for me? And my response is always, yeah, sure, I'm happy to. But I decided that when friends of friends would ask me, what I'd do is I'd charge them a bit of money. And the plan with Palmdale originally, because I always called it Palmdale, was to have it make a little bit of money to help fund my own car fleet. Call it what you want to call it. And so I never forget sitting in my old flat next to my wife on the sofa, telling her about this car a friend had asked to find. And she looked at me and she said, well, when are you going to quit the marketing and start doing this full time? I said, no. I'm a marketing guy. It's like the badge I wear says marketing. I don't want to be a full-time car guy. I knew it felt hollow inside. When you say something, it doesn't resonate. So I trying to find an excuse, and I said to her, well, if I did that, you'd have to support me for a while because there'd be no money to start with. And she said, well, yeah, I just had a big promotion, a massive pay rise. We don't have any kids. If we're going to do this, now's the time to do it. And I paused. I went, okay. And next day I started to sell off the clients I had that were worth any money for my marketing business. I started Palmdale, the car finding company. And that was 17, maybe, no, yeah, it's about 17 and a half years ago now. So it was a long while ago. And for a long while, it ran from the spare room of my flat in Ealing. But today things have changed. Do you want to see?
Yes, please.
So about 5 years ago, we moved we moved into this place.
Right.
And do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to turn this camera around. I think I can. I made technology work amazing. Oops.
Figured it out. Well
done. Hang on. I haven't figured out that much because I'm turning the camera the wrong way. Okay. So this is the office space. Guys, you're on film. Tuli and Obi, say hello to the whole wide world out there. There are 8 million people watching right now. No, not at all.
And it's being recorded as well.
It's being recorded as well, so you live forever. So, and we kind of decorate this place to be kind of a car geek heaven. So we've got
Oh, wow,
on the walls, and we've got just stuff everywhere. But more importantly, it's a place where we can keep our cars. So
Yeah,
that's a car I bought
classics.
alongside. Yeah, that's my '96 Ford Mustang. I bought that a long time ago. This is a car. This is a Porsche we sourced for a client in Australia. It's going to be going out to Australia in a short while. This is a very excessive thing that I bought along with two other friends a few months back. I thought it'd be a good investment. So yeah, I spent a ridiculous amount of money on this with a couple of friends.
It looks like a fun. I like. What make is this? Like, I don't know much about cars, so you
that's
can
right.
give me
It's a Ferrari Testarossa.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's I'm taking the wedding this weekend, and the rest of it here is just space where we store the cars we've sourced for our clients. There's all kinds of stuff.
Wow. So like, obviously you go from the classic all the way to, like I said, the day-to-day sort of like, you know, not boring, but kind of like your average Mercedes.
Absolutely. Well, John, I'm going to sit in this one because this is the most comfortable one we've got here. So I'm going to flip the camera around. I'm going to sit myself in the back of the Bentley.
In the car, and we can continue this conversation.
What better place is there to sit than in the back of a Bentley? So, well, that's much better. Good. Okay,
I still need to come down. I still have to come down. I might just coming to borrow one of the cars just for like a weekend, but you know, we'll talk about that later.
Right, let me try and stick this somewhere where I can. Oh no.
Yeah.
Better.
Perfect.
That's actually working. Amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. That's easy.
Great.
So you ask about classic cars, and actually, you know, we do classic cars, we do older stuff, but most of the classic stuff we do is largely because the team here, we like classic cars. That's what we're into. So we do source classic cars, and we do source things like the Ferrari, and we source things like the Bentleys and things like that. But a lot of our stuff is just normal cars for normal people who aren't especially into their cars, but just don't have the time and energy and effort to find a car themselves.
Yeah. And you've got a lot of international clients. Actually, one of the things that, obviously, this series is called Home Truth. It's more about properties. However, we found that a lot of clients, because of this whole, by 2030, the government is going to stop the sales of diesel and petrol car. Then you've got the whole electric. That's not true.
It's gonna, and it's one word that misses from that. And when you look at the media, what you've said is what people hear. Actually, and every time I hear that, I'm like, ugh. It's stopping the sale of brand new combustion engine vehicles.
Right.
So you'll still be able to go to your BMW dealer and buy a used one.
Right.
And whether it happens in that time scale or not, remains to be seen. But you're right, things are definitely moving more towards electric. But to answer your question, a lot of our clients are international. One of our specialties is actually people who they come from overseas to the UK, and so sure, you'll help them out with the house and the schools for the kids and the mobile phones and stuff like that. And we get called on board to help out with finding them the cars they need. And, you know, being new to the country has lots of tricky issues. You don't know the lay of the land. You don't know that you really can't trust any UK car dealers. Well, it's not all of them, but most of them, perhaps. What do you do if you're going to get you want to get finance? That's a solution that we've solved despite not having credit history. What do you do about insurance? All these things are things we take care of. So yeah, that's international stuff. A massive part for us.
So back to the electric car thing, everyone's asking, not everyone, I mean, we've had a few clients that bought a property and they're like, okay, right, to me, I want to buy a flat, but in the future, I'm looking to buy an electric car. So what does that mean for charging, which tends to be one of the issues. So first of all, will they even need a car? Because that's something you mentioned last time, that when people are saying they want to buy a car, the question you ask them is, would you need a car? And I thought, why is Ashley selling himself out of business? I mean, shouldn't he just be promoting buying a car? So, you know, what is that about in terms of, would you need a car?
I'm a great car guy and a terrible businessman. I refuse to sign up a client who I'm not convinced will get, if I'm not convinced they'll get excellent value from our service, then, you know, I will do what I can to tell them actually there might be something better that they can do. So yeah, you're right. One of the first questions I ask is, will you need a car? And the reality is that if you live in London, you don't really need a car. Between an Uber or a Bolt and the public transport, you may not need one. If you're living out of London, then perhaps you do actually need one. And it depends on, you know, if you've got kids, it depends on where they go to school, how local it is. You know, and it's reality. You may not need a car. But there's a difference between not needing a car and wanting a car.
Yeah.
So we have plenty of clients who live in St John's Wood, for example, and their kids go to the international school, the American school in St John's Wood, and it's a 5-minute walk. They still want a car because once in a while they're going to go out, and for them it's important to have a car. And it's quite funny because we guarantee we'll buy these cars back. So an American family may be in London for 3 years, and then we'll buy the car back, and we'll figure they've done 4,000 miles in the car in 3 years. They just barely used it, but they wanted the car anyway. So no, it's an important first question to ask: do I actually really need a car? And sometimes we say to people, look, don't worry about, perhaps the best thing to do is see how you get along without a car.
Right.
But then we'll hear from them 3 months down the line. Ashley, appreciate the advice. We tried living without a car. We can, but we don't want to.
Right.
But you asked about electric cars. And electric cars, the example you give is really interesting to me because, all right, fine. I love cars with big engines. Like this is actually one of mine at the moment. The Ferrari's mine. The Mustang's mine. I like cars that make a lot of sound. But a year and a half ago, I bought an electric car, bought a little BMW electric car because we're sourcing so many of them. I realized actually what we need to do is we need to actually experience one and have one so we know what they're like.
Exactly, yeah.
And what's interesting is because I live in central-ish London, I live in a flat as well. And I cannot charge the electric car in my flat, but I do have right on my street, right outside my block, there are 3 electric chargers. And what I found out is that they're very rarely used, which is fine for where I am.
Right.
But when I charge up my electric car from those chargers, it costs as much if I was charging up as if I was putting petrol into a small petrol car per mile.
Okay.
It's incredibly expensive. At work, just over there, we have an electric car charger. So therefore, what I do is I bring the electric car into work once in a while, I give it a full charge, and I take it home again. And on commercial rates, they're not that cheap. But if you can charge at home, it's really cheap. But if you can't charge at home, having an electric car starts to not be a cost-saving exercise. So you'd only have one because you want one, because it costs more to buy than a petrol car. It'll cost you much to run as a petrol car. I mean, charging these cars at a service station on the motorway is ridiculously expensive compared. It's the same as a petrol car. So right now.
So what would, I mean, if someone's moved to the UK, buying a property, it's a flat, and they want to buy a car, and they want it to be electric car, what kind of advice would you give them then? Like, obviously they're not going to stop the sale of petrol and diesel cars, so there's still a bit of time. But still, is there anything they ought to do? Or even when they're choosing those properties, should they completely avoid certain properties because they can have their own personal charging point? I mean, because it's something that comes up so often, and I'm like, it's a new world, really, in terms of...
You're asking the wrong guy, because the question was, should I choose my car over where I live? Okay. And for me, yeah, absolutely. I always choose my car over where I live. However, I am not normal, and I accept that. And so most people choosing where they live should come, even I accept, should come before the car that they buy. If you want to live in a flat and you want an electric car, a lot of places will have, so like the big blocks that have the underground parking, a lot of those now, their modern blocks will have charging in there. In fact, if you're building a block now, you have to have electric chargers in. You're not allowed without having electric chargers in. I think we're going to find as this deadline, whenever it comes for the sale of brand new combustion engine vehicles actually comes, I think we're going to find that actually older flats, existing flats, are going to find that they are having to have to install these things as well.
Right.
So it's going to become unrealistic. I'm also thinking that I also believe that the public charging is really expensive at the moment, but I think that's because it can be. I think when people start to rely on it more, it's probably become less expensive. So this issue we've got right now, where it costs me a fortune to charge it from the machine outside my house, starts to become more reasonable. Certain councils as well, so like Kensington, for example, they have chargers in the lamppost sockets that are subsidised for the local. So that's better as well. If you're buying an electric car because you want to be environmentally friendly and you want to be doing the right thing, it's fine, do it. You just have to realize it's going to cost you more. If you're happy to spend the more money on it, that's fine. That's your choice. As long as you go into open eyes, as long as you realize that buying a petrol car is going to be much cheaper overall, that's fine. As long as you realize that you're paying extra for it.
So I guess in that sense, then it's best to wait to see where everything is going, because obviously they still need to set up the infrastructure to accommodate the new electric car to make it more economical. Because at the end of the day, why would you? That means people will end up hanging on to their gas, to their petrol and diesel for much longer because they don't want to convert into that. And right now, it seems less of a hassle because you have to think about charging when you're driving for miles. I know you mentioned when you're traveling for miles, you just need to plan it out, but yeah, it's a bit of a gray space right now.
That whole planning thing's a grey space until you actually done it. Having done it
Right,
myself now, actually, it's really easy.
right, right,
And it's not about, people talk about what they call range anxiety on electric cars. How far will an electric car go? That's not the issue, actually. The issue is how quickly can I charge it?
right.
Because
Okay,
if I
yeah,
could
true.
charge my car as quickly as I can put petrol in it, there's no issue. And that's what's happening in the electric car world at the moment. I think over the next 5 years, I think 5 years now, things will be very different. I think the whole price
Mhm.
construction and availability of electric car charging will be very different. But I also think the electric cars coming out then will probably be able to charge themselves in full in about 5 minutes. That's what
Right.
everyone's working on. There is some tech out there. But they're also working on synthetic fuels. So like petrol, that isn't that bad for the environment. Now, whether it ends up being bad for the environment or not overall, there's lots of debate.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I'm not 100% convinced yet that electric is going to be the ultimate solution or the only solution for cars going.
yeah,
Time
yeah.
will tell. No one knows.
No one knows. Yeah, I mean, I guess you have to try it, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you have to try and see what works and doesn't work, and sometimes you don't know the outcome until you've actually tried it. So let's hope. But outside of electric cars, there's always the whole thing of international clients buying in the UK, and then comes in the insurance.
Yes.
So I know you help them to find the car, you help them even to resell it when they're moving back. Do you help with, the insurance and also driver's license? Because you have 1 year where you can use your your international driver's license, but after 1 year, you potentially, am I wrong? Well, here you are.
Depends where you're coming from.
True.
Question.
Okay, yeah.
We'll answer question one first of all, then we'll go to question two. So as far as insurance goes, so about 3 years ago, every client of ours who came from overseas, the UK, who needed insurance, it was expensive and it was a pain in it. We had to go to a specialist broker who understood the situation, and it cost a lot of money. And then something changed. All the big insurers suddenly, as if they all had a meeting and suddenly said, you know what? Just because you're not from the UK doesn't mean you're going to wreck your car in 5 minutes' time. And therefore, we will have you as clients now. So now, if you go on like the big insurance comparison websites, such as moneysupermarket.com,
Yeah.
compare the market, and you say, I've just moved here from wherever in the world, you'll actually get a reasonable quote. You'll get a much better price than when you get through the specialist insurers.
Yeah.
And actually, so it's really easy now. It's become so much easier. And you're going to find for your first year, you're going to pay a lot more than you would probably, because when you start off, you don't have a UK license and you have no UK driving history. But when your year's renewal comes up, you will have to have had your UK license by now. So I'm segueing into this really well, and you'll have a year's worth of driving history. What happens with your license when you move to the country depends on where it's from.
Right. Okay.
For a lot of countries, you need to then take a test. And you need to pass your test and you can drive in it for 12 months. For European licenses, I should know this off the top of my head. It's either 3 or it's 5 years you can drive on your license for. I think it's 5 years you can drive on your license for. So it's a long time.
Right.
With certain countries, with what they call the old Commonwealth countries, you can actually just convert your license. So you don't have to take a test. You submit it and you apply to rescind your Australian license and get your UK license. I have a trick though. So the issue right now is officially, if you look at the DVLA website, you cannot apply for your UK license until you've been in the UK for 6 months, to resident in the UK for 6 months.
All right.
And you need to get it sorted by the time you've been here for a year. But if you book a driving test at the moment, you'll have about a 7 to 9 month wait until you get your test.
Right. Okay.
So you've got a 6 month window to do something that takes you 7 to 9 months. That doesn't work out. So even though the DVLA website very clearly says, have you been in the UK for 6 months or not? If you ignore that and just go, sure, I have, they never check now. They're purposely not checking now because they've realized that if they make people wait that long, then it's not going to happen. So my advice to anyone move to the UK from overseas and wants a UK license is apply as soon as you get here.
Right.
Take you ages to get it. And actually, even though they say you can't, you can. Right now, they're letting people through. I'm sure when driving tests, the wait times go down to 2 or 3 months, they'll change that back again. But right now, you can very, very, very easily.
Okay. So I'm going to open up for people to ask questions. Not all the questions we're able to answer today, and we can obviously do that later. This is a new world for us, this home truth, but we want to make sure it is for those that are actually joining us as well. So wanting to make sure the questions and the things that we're actually talking about actually hits home and helps. But obviously, once we get those questions, we just carry on. When people are saying they want to buy a car, what are the things they need to think about, what are the questions you ask? Because it's a bit like buying it. Maybe not like buying a house, not quite the same, but it can be quite,
I think it's quite similar because when you're buying a house, you have your basic requirements. So with a car as well, when I speak to someone new, I ask them, do you have family? Do you have kids? How old are your kids? I want to get a picture about how big they are. Do you go on a trip? Do you go on holiday with your car? Do you have any pets that you want to take with you as well? And that kind of gives an idea about the size of the car. So we spoke about fuel of the car. I think we covered that off, electric versus petrol, and even diesel still has a place in this world in some points. But it's about what kind of size car do you want? What kind of features you want it to have? Are you a tech head that wants everything? Are you like me that just really wants an old car and doesn't really care what it's got on it? How old a car do you want? Does it have to be brand new? Would you consider something used? How old will you go? So it's important to then figure out the kind of car you want. And that's the first stage. What we always do here is we help the client figure out the car they want, and there'll be a perfect make and model for them there. And then when they've got that, the question is, okay, how do you want to pay for it? Do you want to just buy cash? Do you want to do a lease on a brand new car? Do you want to just do a finance package on a used car? Do you want to just rent something by month basis? That's
right.
That's the important thing to figure out as well. And there are pros and cons to all of those, but there's something right for certain people.
Okay, so let's pick on that. You said rent and lease. So again, it comes back to, we always have the city or suburb. We've got the clients that are buying properties in London, and then those that are buying in the suburb. Obviously, suburb, there's space, you have parking space, you can have more than one car. Then you're talking city, where you might have, and some areas in London, as you know, you don't even have parking. It's not even an option where you've got residence parking. So getting a car is not even, it's out of your control, that there's just no option. So for those that are in the city where they can at least park one or two cars, you mentioned leasing and renting. I actually don't know what the difference is between the two of them.
Right. No, and I don't like using these terms. These terms are misunderstood, and for that reason, that leasing to an American is very different to leasing to a Brit.
Sure.
So leasing in the UK is when you have a brand new car, and you pay for it per month for a set period of time. So let's say you take out a 3-year lease. You pay a little bit up front. You pay every month. You'll pay X amount of money for 3 years for your car. And then at the end of that, the car goes back. Now, the problem with leasing is A, it's only on a brand new car, so it's quite expensive, and new cars right now difficult to get hold of. But B, it is inflexible. If you take out a 3-year lease and 2 years in, you want to return the car, until you've paid out the remaining year of the lease.
Right.
Whereas a rental, you could do on a month-by-month basis. Yes, it costs more per month, but literally a month comes, you pay for it. Another month comes, you pay for it. And when the time comes, you stop. I don't want to pay for this anymore. Take the car back. It's absolutely fine.
So you're not stuck to a contract then. It's sort of like a rolling contracts.
Yeah, so you pay more per month, quite a bit more per month, but you have that flexibility. However, we find most popular is what a lot of our clients do is they take out finance on a used car. And so what they do is they'll buy a used car. So they're not financing a brand new car, they're financing what's a smaller asset, so it's cheaper to start with. And because the way the finance works is actually they technically own the vehicle, which a lot of people go, I don't want to own a car. But no, that's a good thing because it means you have lots of consumer rights. So if you take out a finance plan and you're 2 years into your 3-year contract and you get a placing somewhere else in the world, you want to leave London, the finance company will work out how much is left to pay on the car. We'll work out what the car is worth, and there'll be a difference between the two. And then they'll add the penalty. And the penalty is legally mandated as 1 month of interest charges, not 1 month payment, 1 month of charge. It's virtually nothing. Okay. And a lot of the time, we've had situations before where someone's left early, and just the way the contract's been, they leave with money. That difference is actually in their favour.
Right. Okay.
So that's a bit more flexible. But those are the differences. But my general advice is always, if you have the cash to pay for a car, why pay interest to someone else?
So you wouldn't. So the leasing is not necessarily best, because there's also that issue of if that brings into different conversation about insurance altogether, where it's about some insurance seems to just not really give you value. It's almost like they're just ticking a box to say legally you've ticked because obviously in the UK you've got to have insurance to drive. If you don't, it's a criminal offense, blah blah blah. But you then have insurances that don't seem to then try to provide good service, you know. So that can be quite problematic when people are asking us. Obviously, we recommend them to insurance brokers. But what's been your experience in that area?
So with the quality of insurance?
Yeah.
Yeah, it varies. My advice always go for a good insurance company. And a lot of the time, even on the price comparison websites, a client will go, I found these 5 quotes. I've never heard of any of these companies before. Can you offer me some opinion on them? We'll go, yeah, don't go with them. They're a big company. They should be okay. They're really good. We know with them. So it's difficult. It's just experience. But yeah, the cheapest is not always the best. And no one likes to buy insurance. None of us want to pay insurance because we all assume we're spending the money on the insurance and we're never going to see it back again. But when you need it, you really need it. So it's
True.
important to go for the best one you can.
Yeah, yeah. But sometimes when you then need it and then you get to the insurance, it can be quite, even that you're not guaranteed that you're going to get treated properly. That's the other issue. So it can be quite it's a murky subject, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, very
Okay.
much.
Okay. And in terms of when families are buying cars, there's always that question about security. So I know the 5-star NCAP, all those things that happen. How do you advise on that? If someone says, I want something that is safe, it's like, well.
So all cars have, security and safety are two different things. Security for me is how likely a car is to be stolen, and safety is how likely it is to protect you in a crash. So safety ratings are published now for most cars. There's an organization called Euro NCAP who do safety on all cars. And actually you can drill down. If you know what you're reading, you can drill down. I'll be quite frank, it amazes me how few of our clients are concerned about safety. It's not often I've got to go through and go, well, that one's safer than that one. And the problem with the NCAP ratings is that a car that was brought out in 2016 will have a 2016 rating. Whereas a car equivalent might have been bought in 2018 with a 2018 rating. And even though an 18 one may be 4-star and the 16 one maybe 5-star, the 18 one may be a better, safer car because the standards were higher at that time.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot to understand. The nice thing is though, when I was growing up, the cars that my parents drove me around in, it's same with anything that that was from the 80s or 70s that you pray you didn't have an accident in it. And I like classic cars. I spend most of my time driving cars that are 30 plus years old, and I ignore the fact what happens if I have a crash. Modern cars in general are so much safer. You've got to be doing something pretty stupid to really hurt yourself in the car. If you look at deaths of passengers in cars now, they've gone down in huge amounts. Interesting for me, the one thing that's going to really reduce the death toll on our roads more than anything else, so when it comes out, driverless cars.
Aha. Right.
People are scared of how I don't want this computer driving for me. The computer doesn't get stressed because he had an argument with his wife before he left home. He's not running late to a meeting. He's not thinking about something else happening during the day. A computer is always on it all the time, and is going to not make the same mistakes.
True.
So
I guess it's for us control freaks out there. You're thinking, hell no. I need to be in control of this car. I can't leave it to a computer. And then, because if you're born around the Terminator time when you watch that, you're thinking, not so sure about that.
Arnie is not going to come and drive your car for you. Okay, that's not going to happen.
What was the other one? The other evil one. Anyway, so my mind goes in different places. A sci-fi world where I'm thinking maybe not too crazy about this driverless. The fact that we have the Docklands light railway is bad enough as it is. And then now we've got a driverless car. Not so sure. But in terms of other advice you can give in terms of choices of cars, there's now the hybrid. That's the other thing. The hybrid thing.
Oh, you're hitting one of my buttons here. Wow. Okay, so there's 4 things. There's 4 main things really. Okay, there's pure petrol or diesel, a pure combustion engine. At the other end of the scale, there's pure electric. Then in the middle, we have all these hybrid things. And there's actually, there's 5 things. Actually, there's 3 types of hybrids. There is what they call a mild hybrid, which is where they take a petrol engine and they mount on the side that a little electric motor that just helps the engine out.
Right.
We find that a lot of modern cars the last year or 2 are now mild hybrids. The reality is they don't do a massive amount. They do a small amount, but not a massive amount.
Right.
Then further down the line, you get self-charging hybrids. Now, these became really popular. Like the Toyota Prius is usually a self-charging hybrid. So as you're driving around, sometimes it will be driving yourself on electric, and sometimes it's driving yourself on petrol. Now, around town, these are good, and they will save you fuel, and they'll be better for the environment. But on a long run, the hybrid doesn't work very well. So in actual fact, on a long run, these things are actually usually less fuel efficient than a pure petrol car. And you go,
Oh, really?
you go, how is that? And the reason is that a hybrid car has a engine, petrol engine, and an electric battery and electric motors. They weigh a lot. So on the motorway where it can't use the hybrid very much, it's putting the extra weight along. So that's why hybrids are, if you're doing lots of town stuff, cool. If you're doing long runs, then perhaps not so good. Then you get plug-in hybrids. Now, plug-in hybrids are actually a proper mix between a petrol car and an electric car. Because what they'll do is, a plug-in hybrid, you can plug it into the wall and you can charge it. You don't get 200 miles or whatever it is you do in an electric car. You get maybe 15, modern ones 30, 40 miles. Electric, then the engine cuts in. Now, they're not as ecological as a pure electric car because, again, you're towing that heavy engine and gearbox and everything around with you when you're using the pure electric. And also, you've got the energy cost of producing both sets of both drivetrains in the same place. But to give you a really good example, one of my good friends, we sourced him a BMW X5, so on a big BMW 4x4s plug-in hybrid about a year ago. And his first year, he's done 9,000 miles on that car. 4,500 miles of those were in pure electric. For me, that's a good thing. But it depends. All these things depend on your use.
Right.
That's what's right for one person is never going to be right for someone else.
So obviously, city driving versus motorway driving has a lot. That sort of like determines quite a lot in the choice of cars. Then.
Yeah, very much so. So what you're going to be using it for is very much, very much so. And how far you want to go. For me, a plug-in hybrid is kind of like it's a cross between you're using electric. And, it's funny because with petrol cars we talk about fuel consumption. The car I'm sitting in right now has the most woeful, appalling fuel consumption ever. And every time I start it up, I swear it wants more fuel. I put 100 quid in, and 5 minutes later it wants another 100 quid worth of fuel. It's terrible. But a small car, you think a small petrol car, you get through better fuel. And we think about that in terms of petrol engines. But we don't think about that with electric cars, but it's still the same. A big Tesla gets through a shed load more electricity than my little BMW i3 electric car.
Right.
So right now, we don't think about that. But as time goes on, we're going to think more about that. So right now, a plug-in hybrid seems fine because, it doesn't matter. You're using pure electric.
Yeah.
The big heavy car, you're getting through a lot more pure electric. So that will change in people's perceptions coming as time goes by.
In terms of in the electric one, is a lot of it is knowledge, really, like first-hand experience and knowledge. It's just because right now, like I said, it's a gray area. No one really knows what's and what's not, and it's just exploratory for almost everyone. But I didn't even think about that. The size of electric car also plays in with as it would with the small,
People don't right now, and it's also very difficult because the manufacturers who are selling the car, they want you to buy their car. Of course they do. That's what they want. And the information they give is not always the same as the other manufacturer gives. And how are you supposed to figure out? You go to a BMW dealer about buying a BMW car, the salesman there knows that BMW is the best electric car. You go to a Hyundai dealer about buying a Hyundai electric car, the salesman knows the Hyundai is the best electric car. Hang on. They can't both be right. And a lot of my time is spent fielding these questions because I'll be quite frank, I don't care whether a client of mine buys a Hyundai or buys a BMW or buys a Maserati or buys a Ford. I want to buy what's right for them. It's important that it's very difficult to get that independent advice. Or I'm always happy to give it. But it's tough. It's really tough making that decision.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, this has been quite insightful. We've had a few questions, but the questions that were asked, we've already answered while we were talking about it.
That we know that they were great questions.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, I personally, my thing is always, this is back to the insurance thing in terms of when you're buying, do you want to be finicky about off-street parking, kind of garage parking, if you're community, all those things? Do you advise as well in those areas, or?
Yeah, happy to. I think as we said before, unless you're really weird like me, the house has got to come before the car. I mean, every time we move, it drives my wife nuts. I'm like, no, I don't like that street because the street's too narrow and the cars get scraped actually. And no, I don't want that one. Doesn't have a drive. Buy the house and then figure out the car from there onwards.
Okay. So one last question. This is more of a
Yes.
classic cars now. So obviously with the classic cars, they don't meet any of the requirements in terms of ULEZ or all the other stuff. So where does that, when if somebody wanted to buy a classic car, which they most likely wouldn't use on a day-to-day
Yeah.
basis, what would you advise in terms of, anything really?
Okay.
Like,
Actually, it depends on the age of classic car. If tonight I have to go into the West End of London and I wish to drive and I don't wish to pay, I have two cars I can take. Number one is my electric BMW, which at the moment, up until later on this year, I don't pay congestion charge for or ULEZ or anything like that. And the other one is my 1964 Mustang, which we saw earlier.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it's over a certain age, I don't pay road tax, I don't pay congestion charge, I don't pay ULEZ, I don't pay anything like that. So actually, if they're over a certain age, then actually that is fine. But at home, I have two classic cars that are late 80s, early 90s. And I live just outside the ULEZ zone. So right now, I can, as long as I'm driving west, because I live in Ealing, as long as I drive west, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Or I drive east, I know it's going to cost me £12.50 a time. But when that changes, probably another year's time, every time I take one of those cars out, I'm going to have to pay for it. But you made the point exactly. These are classic cars. I don't drive them every day. I drive them when I want to drive them. So I'm happy to say, because I thought, well, maybe I've got to sell them because if they're leaving at home, then I'm not going to use them anymore. I'll pay the £12.50 a day. The nice thing about a classic car is they don't depreciate, they appreciate.
Right.
I take it out once a week and I pay £12.50 a week to drive it compared to another car that depreciates by £100 a week. These aren't accurate figures, but yeah, I'm fine with that. So yeah, I don't, classics don't get used every day. They are wonderful things to use every day. I love my old cars. I cannot encourage anyone more to go and buy an old car. You have such joy. Don't get into a crash with it. You won't survive. But there's such joyous things to own. But yeah, you have to pay your charges on some of them and some of them you don't.
Yeah, I didn't realize that you wouldn't have to pay ULEZ on some of them on the old cars. That was interesting. I think you just assumed that when they say anything older than that includes the classic cars as well, when it sounds like it doesn't necessarily include them depending on the year.
I think at the moment it is anything older than 1972.
Okay.
I could feel someone watching this Googling it and going, it's 1973. I think if it's older than 1972, it is free of road tax, it's free of congestion charge, it's free of ultra emissions, it's free of everything. And it's also free of an MOT test, which I'd still encourage anyone classic car owners to get the MOT test done every year because it's a safety thing.
Yeah.
It's weird the UK does this. There's something that I've always assumed that there's lots of people higher than government who own classic cars who keep them on our roads for people like me.
So we've got one question, and that's probably the last one in the end.
Sure.
So the question is saying, what brand is economical to buy, the most economical to buy in this current financial climate?
Okay. If you don't care about the badge on your car and you want reliability and you want equipment and good value for money, I say to clients the whole time, buy a Kia or a Hyundai.
Really?
Yeah,
Kia?
absolutely. Do you know what? They're not sexy. If you're at a party and someone says, what do you drive? And you say Kia or Hyundai, they're going to talk to the next person who drives a BMW or Porsche or something like that. But you know what? They're great value for money. Kias come with a 7-year warranty for 7 years from when they're new. Something goes wrong, you just roll it back into the Kia dealer. They take care of it for you. I mean, they always work. They're well equipped. The later ones drive really well. On electric cars, I know we said about BMWs and brands before. I think the German brands are coming out with boring electric cars right now. I think the real cutting edge stuff is coming from Korea. And I think soon it's going to come from China as well. There's some really interesting stuff coming out of China right now.
And there are lots of brands, new electric cars that I've never heard of, like Neo and some of those.
Yeah. There's loads of Chinese brands coming, and they are pretty much all from China, and there's stuff that's been in China for years that most of us have never heard of, but they're going to be. What I saw a Lynx and Co. On the motorway the other day. Oh, it's Lynx and Co. Chinese car company, and you know what? It looked really good, and the reviews of it are really good too. So, but we see as time goes by, when Japanese cars first came out.
Yeah.
They were cheap but good. when Korean cars first came out, Hyundais and Kias, they were
Hmm.
cheap but good. Now Korean cars are just cheap and really very good. And I think Chinese cars are going to be the next thing as well.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
my advice. I'm
Yeah.
big. I would never own a Kia or a Hyundai because I'm too shallow. But for a lot of our clients, great cars.
Thank you so much.
Very
We're
well.
still gonna, if anyone still has, obviously the recording is gonna be put on our Instagram page. So if there are any questions, we'll put that together, and myself and Ashley will put some and Q&A and answer as many other questions as we can answer, just to help you with your car purchases or determining whether you want a electric vehicle or hybrid and anything else in between. We try to help with that. But thank you so much, Ashley. This has
Thank
been
you very much,
quite
Timmy.
insightful, actually, I have to say. So thank you everyone for joining. And like I said, you can definitely get more of the information once we post this recording much later. So thank you everyone. Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you.
Bye everyone.